Thor's hammer Mjolnir is one of the most iconic weapons in all of Marvel Comics. Like,
yes!
Yeah, it's ultimately just at its core a big hammer, but it also has that whole enchantment that makes it so only worthy people are allowed to wield it. But of those who have wielded Mjolnir, which were the most powerful? Who could swing that hammer the best and who couldn't handle the awesome might and power of Thor? Well, that's what I'm here today to discuss. I'm making a list of the most powerful Mjolnir users and working my way down. That's fun, right?
Mjolnir over here taking a nap.
Right, it's going to be a blast, so let's get started right now. It's kind of a surprise for me that Venom is at the top of this list when it comes to how powerful a character can be while wielding Mjolnir. But the way he used it was nothing short of jaw-dropping. First, it's a surprise that Venom was able to lift it at all. I mean, yeah, Venom now leans toward being a good guy, but he still feels like a character who loves to munch on brains and generally bends the rules if it's something that he wants. Those types of heroes don't seem like the normal lifting Mjolnir types, but there was a special exception here. In the King in Black storyline, which saw the evil Null try to wipe out everything, Eddie Brock was eliminated by Null, but then was resurrected by the Enigma Force. Sort of like the Phoenix Force, the Enigma Force represented life and light in the universe. I can't confirm this, but I also think it loves asking riddles. I mean, you can't be the Enigma Force without asking riddles, right? Anyway, with the Enigma Force coursing through his veins, Eddie and Venom literally summoned Mjolnir out of Thor's hands, which just by itself is a boss level move. But then it didn't end there. After summoning the hammer, Venom summoned Silver Surfer's iconic board, and then using his newfound cosmic powers, combined them together to make a battle axe that was even shaped like the Venom logo, which was just amazing. So for style, for creativity, and for end results, Venom using Mjolnir is one of the most powerful beings to ever utilize it.
You love me!
And speaking of Silver Surfer, I think he deserves the next spot on this list. There's a wild Thanos-centric comic series out there that sees the Mad Titan travel to the end of the universe and sees a future where he has become King Thanos. In this reality, we see a cosmic Ghost Rider, we see the Hulk become basically King Thanos' brute strength pet, and we also see a new version of Silver Surfer. And he's now no longer known as the Silver Surfer, but rather he calls himself the Fallen One and comes with a nifty all-black upgrade thanks to being imbued with black matter. This version of Silver Surfer has spent a millennia training to become worthy of wielding Mjolnir, which is kind of insane to think about. Serious kudos to the former Herald of Galactus for devoting that time to work on himself and become worthy. If given thousands of years, do you think you could become worthy of Thor's hammer? What would that even entail? Meditating every day? Cutting out gluten? Collecting all the loose carts you see at the grocery store parking lot and putting them in their designated spots every time? Seems like a lot of work, but I respect Silver Surfer for being so committed, and then he was able to use the hammer to beat up not one, but two versions of Thanos, so that's also fun. Beta Ray Bill may not be the strongest when it comes to wielding Mjolnir, but he's definitely one of the fan favorites. The love for this character in the comics has left many a fan wondering just when the Corbinite would make his big MCU debut, especially since there have been so many references to him. Like, there's a fun Easter egg of his statue on the gladiator head thing in Thor Ragnarok, and the fact that Stormbreaker was originally Bill's weapon in the comics just has left us all wondering how the MCU would adapt this particular story. But Bill using Mjolnir requires a special mention. So originally in the comics, what had happened was that in their first meeting, Thor got separated from Mjolnir, reverted to his human form of Don Blake, then Bill knocked him out. Then it turned out Bill was worthy by picking up the hammer and wanted to claim the weapon as his own. Asgard's worst dad, Odin, put together a new battle to the death between Bill and Thor, and even though Bill won that fight and had an overall advantage thanks to Odin's tampering, he refused to eliminate Thor for good and thus just proved his worthiness even more. That's when he was given his own weapon known as Stormbreaker, so kudos to Bill and please show up soon in the MCU. Jane Foster coming back for Thor Love and Thunder is a major surprise. After Natalie Portman was vocal about the less than stellar experience of shooting Thor the Dark World, as well as disappointment over the treatment of her character, On top of them seeming to put Thor through a soft reboot in Thor Ragnarok, it seemed like we had seen the last of Jane Foster in the MCU. But surprise, nope. Taika Waititi surprised everyone at a Comic-Con panel by revealing that Jane was coming back and would become the Mighty Thor like in the comics. Now, overall, the Mighty Thor was a worthy replacement for regular Thor. What had happened was that in the comics, Nick Fury had whispered to Thor about how Gore the God Butcher was actually right, and that basically made Thor doubt himself and his own worthiness for a bit, and he lost the ability to wield Mjolnir. Well, Jane Foster, who at the time was currently going through cancer treatment, tried her hand at lifting Mjolnir and found herself transformed with the power of Thor, becoming the Mighty Thor. She became Asgard's greatest protector during this time and proved she was just as capable using Mjolnir as anyone else. She proved what a great hero she could be, and I can't wait to see how Thor Love and Thunder adapts this storyline. I have high hopes. Loki is on an interesting path right now. His original version redeemed himself only to almost immediately be choked out by Thanos, but then a variant version of the character also has started undergoing the more heroic transformation that we all know he's capable of. So the big thing is, will this lead to Loki eventually wielding Mjolnir? I hope so. I've said before that Loki holding Mjolnir in a future movie would be the perfect end to his overall character arc. Anyways, let's talk about comic instances when Loki has wielded the hammer. It was a pretty awesome moment. So there was once a storyline called Axis that followed what happened if the morality and character of everyone was flipped. So good guys became bad guys and bad guys became good guys. And in this instance, a good Loki was forced to fight an evil Thor. The fight led them to the moon where Mjolnir just happened to be. Although Loki was having trouble fighting his brother because Thor was obviously more powerful, Loki now had the heart of a hero and proved his worthiness by lifting the hammer and beating up bad Thor with it. It's a cheer-worthy moment for sure. In one of those fun, wacky comic DC and Marvel crossovers, there was once a time when Superman lifted Mjolnir. And I mean, that makes sense, right? If there was any DC hero that would be worthy to pick up the hammer, then it would have to be Superman. He's the embodiment of truth, justice, and all that jazz. He's the ultimate good guy. So in the JLA Avengers crossover, there's this epic moment where Superman is wielding Mjolnir in one hand and holding Captain America's shield in the other. Glorious, right? Surely Superman using Mjolnir would make him the most powerful on this list, right? Well, not necessarily. It was revealed later that Superman couldn't lift it again, and Thor talks about how some unworthies were allowed to overcome the spell in desperate hours. Plus, if you look at that scene, it does sort of look like Thor is giving the hammer all the energy and strength, while Superman is just sort of redirecting it to where it needs to go. So sorry, Sup, maybe next time. Could Magneto use his powers of magnetism to lift Mjolnir? Well, in our main universe, no. The worthiness aspect trumps the mutant's abilities. But in the Ultimate Universe, it's a different story. Over there, the circumstances are different, where he can use his powers to control the electromagnetic field around the hammer and thus swing it around. He just can't tap into the powers that the hammer holds. He isn't embedded with the power of Thor when he holds it, but rather he's just a scary dude with a big hammer. He's ranked here on this list though because of the intimidation factor. But now the big question, do you think in our universe Magneto could ever become powerful enough to circumvent the worthiness clause and control the hammer? I would say never. This list has mostly been all comics related, but I wanted to throw in one movie character who proved to not necessarily be worthy, but rather just overall powerful enough to control and eventually destroy Mjolnir. I'm of course talking about Hela. In Thor Ragnarok, it was revealed that Odin had another child, and the two of them conquered the 9 realms together until Odin grew a conscience.
Really?
What's interesting though is that we saw that Hela actually wielded Mjolnir before Odin had put the enchantment on it. So is that the reason why the hammer didn't have a huge effect on Hela when Thor chucked it at her? She didn't exactly wield it in the scene, but rather she just stopped it rather easily and then without breaking a sweat, broke the hammer into a million pieces. That's an ultimate power move right there, which has always begged the question, sure, Hela stopped and destroyed the hammer, but if she wanted to, could she pick it up and use it herself? She may not be worthy by any stretch, but does her powers and relationship to Odin allow her to circumvent the worthiness aspect? This is a list of worthy people ranked by power, and sometimes the power level that I'm referring to means more about the image of holding Mjolnir and what that does to the people watching. Because sure, you can be powerful swinging the hammer around and smacking people in the face, but there's also a lot of power in breaking your enemy's morale. And that's sort of what happened when the evil version of Captain America used the hammer. Thanks to Cosmic Cube shenanigans, the worthiness aspect of the spell on Mjolnir was altered, and it allowed this newly evil version of Steve Rogers to step up and swing it around. This was a huge blow to everyone watching. What had happened was Thor was phased out of existence, which allowed this evil version to walk right up, pick up the hammer, and hold it high for the world to see. And everyone was rocked to their core. Of course, you would find out later that the evil version of Captain America was never actually worthy, a fact not known to him, but still this was an excellent morale-shattering moment. Dr. Doom's inclusion on this list is a little iffy, I admit, but the story around him with Mjolnir is just too good. So Doom is actually stuck in hell and trying desperately to escape. Luckily, an Asgardian portal opens up near him and he sees his chance to escape. While using the portal, he sees Mjolnir, and for a second, Doom feels enough Asgardian power within him that he believes he's capable of holding Mjolnir and wielding it. In his mind, he's worthy. Of course, that's not the case. And again, iffy inclusion here, but the visual of Doom fighting to get out of hell by jumping through a portal and having Asgardian forces flow through his body enough to want to reach out and grab Mjolnir is an exciting visual that no one on this list can really top. Odin's enchantment is what makes Mjolnir so special in the first place, and it constantly challenges Thor to live up to the lofty expectations of worthiness. But did you know the hammer was also Odin's weapon of choice when he was younger? Yeah, and the history behind the hammer is wild. During a battle, two elder gods shattered a moon made of Uru, and the pieces were found by dwarves, and later one chunk was gifted to Odin. Then, a cosmic storm called the God Tempest threatened Asgard, and to defeat it, Odin trapped the storm inside the Uru chunk and then asked the dwarves to forge Mjolnir. That's rad. I only give that backstory because after the hammer was forged and Odin started using it, he could barely control it due to its immense power, and it had to be enchanted and managed over time. Odin even used the hammer while fighting with the prehistoric Avengers, which is a fun little tidbit. But yeah, his inability to control it properly at first places Odin near the bottom of this list. So Bor is Odin's father and was resurrected by Loki in more modern times because Loki loves a little chaos. Loki ended up tricking Bor into thinking Earth was full of monsters and needed to be wiped out, which led to Thor's intervention. Performing his usual trick of chucking Mjolnir at his enemy, Thor tries this against Bor, but to his surprise, his grandfather simply catches the hammer and tosses it aside. There's nothing to this moment that's particularly powerful, and it's never really explained why Bor can do this, but perhaps it's because he's the father of the Asgardian who made the enchantment, or was technically born before the enchantment was placed, or was in fact worthy himself. I guess that is technically an option. There are a few loopholes around Mjolnir's enchantment that Thor's enemies and opponents have employed over the years. Because yes, although you do need to be worthy in order to lift the hammer, that doesn't mean you have to be worthy to lift Thor. If the God of Thunder is holding the hammer, then if you're strong enough, you can move the hammer around. That's actually what Hulk ended up doing at least once in the comics. The rivalry between Thor and Hulk is one of the greatest in the comics, as their strength levels always seem to be even with each other.
Right.
But of course, Thor does have the advantage with his lightning abilities and his hammer, which made it all the funnier when Hulk used the hammer that Thor was still holding on to and used it to viciously beat the God of Thunder with. That's such a fun loophole in my opinion. It's much better than the gravity loophole others have used in the comics because this one actually does make sense. Do you think Deadpool could ever be worthy enough to wield Mjolnir?
Just trying to be the world's best X-Man. Sorry.
I mean, no. Not in the standard way, at least. Yeah, Deadpool is a great hero at times, but there's just too many factors working against him. So how did he end up wielding Mjolnir? Well, it was actually through a Loki shenanigan that saw a duplicate hammer being made and it falling into Deadpool's hands. So although it wasn't technically real, it did answer the question of what type of things the merc with the mouth would do if he ever became like Thor. Yes, he obviously started talking with a Shakespearean accent, but he also did things like played baseball with it, played one of the strength machines with it, and naturally busted out animals from Michael Jackson's estate. So he didn't do anything specifically powerful with the hammer, but at least he had some fun. At the bottom of this list is Iron Man. His experience holding the hammer was brief and he didn't end up doing that much with it. Of course, Tony Stark isn't exactly a worthy character thanks to the whole plethora of different faults and inner demons, but he was able to pick up the hammer one time when Mjolnir had lost its special enchantment. In this instance, Tony wanted to take the hammer in for testing and Thor didn't want that, and it ended with Tony picking up the hammer and smacking Thor with it. Though in a not quite shocking conclusion, this didn't seem to have any effect on the God of Thunder. It looked like the God of Thunder was hit with a foam toy. That's how strong Thor is in general. I guess the only good thing about this instance is that Tony got photo proof that he did in fact hold Mjolnir and he did in fact hit Thor with it. And I guess that's something, right? Question for you, who do you think in the MCU is worthy of Mjolnir but hasn't tried picking up the hammer? Spider-Man, Ant-Man, Shang-Chi, Yelena? Any of them? None of them? What would they have to do to become worthy? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.